Okay, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. It's 6:01. Welcome to episode number 37 of the Officiating Program's Tuesday night Zoomcast. Very pleased to have you with us again tonight. And as I always say, for those that are regulars, we appreciate your continued commitment and dedication to our programs, both on and off the ice. Tonight's topic is we want to discuss the retention of officials and really kind of sort of delve into some of the issues that causes us to lose our officials, or at least a percentage of our officials every year. Our panelists tonight, as you know, I'm Matt Leaf. I'm the director of the Officiating Education Program. And our panelists tonight is first of all, introduce Paul Carnathan. He is currently our state supervisor of officials for Georgia. Longtime official, almost 30 years on the ice with the International Ice Hockey Federation, working some world championships, the American League, ECHL, NCAA. Started out in their junior officiating development program, is now, and I believe is now also doing some coaching at the minor professional level. And then our second panelist tonight is Thor Nelson, who was currently our North Dakota state supervisor of officials. 20 plus years in the National Hockey League as a linesman. He represented the NHL and USA Hockey in the 2006-2010 Olympic Games and brings a wealth of experience from Minot, North Dakota for us as we get into this discussion. So Paul and Thor, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Matt.
It's
got Thor listed as me. So anyway, I'm Paul. That's Thor.
Okay, I'm not sure we'll get that corrected. Yep. Okay, so thank you again for everyone for joining us. Just a quick reminder, if you do have a question that you want to ask any of the panelists or anything that you want to address tonight, please feel free to use the Q&A section down below. But in the meantime, as we always do, we're going to start with a few questions for you, some poll questions. Let me go ahead and launch that. If you could take a minute or two and go through, answer each question, and at the end, go ahead and submit. We'll take a look at it from there, and we'll see what kind of information we can gather from our audience tonight. Okay, let's go ahead and share the results. Okay, question number one: have you recently had a discussion with an official who decided not to register this season and or is planning not to register next season? We are split exactly 50-50 on that question. Number two, if your answer to question number one was yes, what was the reason they gave for making the decision not to register? Looking at it, looks, again, very much split evenly between COVID, the pandemic, abuse, registration requirements, and also the local politics. So very interesting there. For you personally, what is the least appealing aspect of officiating? Looks like 45%, 44%. The local politics, 39% abuse that we receive, 6% with the registration requirements, and other is 11%. What area do you feel USA Hockey would be able to have the biggest impact in improving retention rates? 33% looks like we're pretty split here. Is abuse, eliminate the abuse as much as possible. 28% holding game assigners accountable to provide opportunities, development for all officials. And 39% mandating a comprehensive mentor program that promotes a more positive officiating culture. Again, very evenly split there. And question number 5, does your local officials group have a positive working relationship with the hockey clubs they service? 89% said yes, and 11% said no. So again, we very much appreciate that feedback, and it is important for us, and I think it's rather interesting tonight how things seem to be relatively evenly split. Paul, we'll start with you. Any thoughts on that feedback real quick?
Well, I find it interesting, Matt, that, it's not more of a consensus. I do think those are the top areas on where we need to focus. And frankly, I think it comes down to, it's very regionalized. I think it comes down to associations, and I think it also comes down to the individual states and everybody doing a great part. I think there's some portions of the country, having traveled for hockey, where I think this is less of an issue. And I think there's other areas where, we could probably improve as a group.
Yeah, Thor, anything stand out with you?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Having traveled, it's interesting because we don't really see it up here in our neck of the woods with the politics of the assignments. I have heard stories about other locales, and it's frustrating to hear that. It's a shame that it comes to that. And I guess our goal is to keep working and try to improve that situation so that's not an issue, because that's certainly something that we can control.
Matt, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Very good. I think we're going to start out here with a relatively simple question, I think, for both of you, just to get into a little bit of the background before I get into the presentation. But look, both of you would be considered significant success stories within the USA Hockey Officiating Program, both on and off the ice, in terms of having a very successful high-level career on the ice, and now coming back and still being involved as a volunteer in some pretty significant positions for us. We'll start with you, Paul. What was it exactly that got you started in officiating? And I think more importantly, what is it that has kept you going and got you to this point?
Yeah, good question, Matt. So I started as a teenager, and really I started because I didn't want to work at a McDonald's, or I didn't want to do some of those other jobs that most teenagers get, in high school. And for me, it was a way just to stay involved, stay on the ice, and make a little extra cash. And as I started progressing my officiating career, I started in Colorado, where, home of USA Hockey, and I started having some folks kind of push me and ask questions in regards to what I wanted to do with my career. And frankly, that wasn't anything that I'd really considered before. I was just doing it as a way to make some extra money. And then when I started hearing about, the junior development program and higher level hockey and being exposed to that, that's really where I started, putting my attention and my aspirations and trying to reach the highest level as I could. And I think most of us who, start out as players, we like to keep that competitive nature. And anybody who's seen me play hockey knows that I was only going to go so far as a hockey player, and I just didn't have the skill set to move on past, where I was at in midget travel hockey. So this was a way, in college to continue to stay on the ice and continue to compete. And the biggest thing that kept me in it, to answer your question, is, and I'm sure Thor will mention this too, is the fraternity or friendships that you make within the game. And I'm fortunate to have, friends literally throughout the world now, thanks to the sport. And it brought me, the opportunity to travel the country, which is something I love to do, and ultimately travel the world. So that's how I got into it, and that's how I wanted to stay involved. And then it's a bit of a long-winded answer, so I'll try and wrap it up. But I also wanted to make sure that I gave back to the future generations the way that folks had given to me when I was, starting out. So anything I can do to help out in a supervisor capacity, or, to help out with USA Hockey and encourage other, young boys and girls fulfill their dreams, is something that's meaningful to me.
Okay, Thor, same question. What got you started in this profession, so to speak, and most importantly, what's kept you going?
Well, much like Paul said, our playing ability wasn't quite what we had hoped it would be. I played in the USHL and then up in the Saskatchewan League for a while. Walked on at college, and when I was done, I actually started coaching for a year. I loved coaching. Couldn't stand the parents. So a good friend of mine, Mike Schmidt, who at that point was one of the top amateur guys in the world, He got me involved, and basically I was the same way. I wanted to just stay involved in the game. I love the game, and really had no aspirations of doing it for a living. I just wanted to work locally and hopefully someday work an international tournament, much like Mike had done at the World Juniors at that point. And, one thing led to another. I went to the development camps with USA Hockey the 3 years in a row, and the National Hockey League offered me a job. And it was, I miss being on the ice. I miss that rush of skating out in front of 20,000 people that aren't happy with me, even though we haven't done anything yet. I don't miss the travel. I don't miss the hotel nights, but I really miss the friendships that I made over those years. And it really is a fraternity of the guys and the gals that you get to know. I had the pleasure of supervising the women's nationals in 2005, and to see some of those ladies go on and work the Olympics, and now to be a part of helping the next generation get to a state tournament, a national tournament, and hopefully on international hockey. Like, that's kind of what drives me now is seeing the next generation of officials coming up.
Okay, thanks. And Paul, a quick, I guess, a follow-up question for you is that, look, us old timers always kind of sort of talk about how the culture has changed a little bit. How would you answer the question is what exactly has changed, and how the culture has changed and from when you started, and how has that impacted our officiating program, and specifically how we're able to retain officials?
Yeah, good question. So I'll try not to go too far off the guardrails here, but I think the way officials are treated has kind of gone along with the way the culture and society has kind of changed and evolved since I started, 42 now, and I started when I was 14 years old. And back in the day, it seemed like there was a little bit more respect for authority than there is now, just overall. And with that, even though, USA Hockey's put a lot of effort into zero tolerance and ensuring that we have the tools in our toolbox to deal with abuse accordingly. I'm, as Matt mentioned, coaching a U10 travel team now, and I just see some of the way some of these parents act and coaches, even at the U10 level. And it's just made it very difficult, especially on newer officials. And it's something that I'm hoping, if we can work with these hockey associations, and I think we'll talk more about that during our discussion, but working with the local associations and getting everybody on board, because sooner or later, these teams are going to have to realize that they're only compounding the problem by allowing their parents and their coaches to act the way they do. And that they're actually hurting themselves because they're not getting higher level, talented, quality officials who want to stick with it for all those reasons. So the culture's kind of devolved in that manner, despite all the efforts put forth by USA Hockey, and despite, I think, some supervisors and associations who really want to stick by their officials.
Yeah, and Thor, I've had the pleasure of being or going to Minot a couple of times. We did a district officiating seminar about 20 plus years ago, and also had an ACHA College Club Division I national championship that I participated in. One of the things that always struck me about Minot is the amazing community that the officials tend to come together and work together and really be a close-knit group. Has that been maintained over the years from when you got started, or is it even a little bit more difficult to keep that community together?
Ironically, we're planning on a DOS this fall, and we are hosting an ACHA National Championships in a month. So it's come full circle. I would say for a period of time, not an overly lengthy one, but it did kind of fade away a little bit. We've really pushed recently being the last 8-10 years, to get back to that fraternity with the officials. One thing, coming from a small town, even in North Dakota, we're not that small, but based on everybody else in the world, we are. We basically, our hockey community is not that large, so we always officiate in front of the same people, and the familiarity can be an issue at times. You know, most of the dads, it's probably take a break at some point from officiating and coach their kids team, and then they come back to the officiating side once the kid reaches a certain age. So I think that core group has been instrumental in that fraternity and bringing on the next group of officials, helping them get to the next level. And I think it's something that's probably tougher in a big city. I think of like Philly or Pittsburgh, you know, when you get to those big communities, I think that's probably a little more difficult to do. So I guess that's a bonus of us being in a smaller community. We've had some success out of here with guys going on to the next level and then some. So we want to continue that tradition, and you know, we're trying to make it a statewide tradition at this point. And that's my goal as the state referee in chief now, is to make that a statewide thing, and we're working on that, you know, that kind of model for all our communities.
Okay, very good. I'm going to share my screen and go into a little bit of a presentation here. I know that for the regulars, some of you have probably seen some of the numbers that I'm going to share tonight, but some of it is also new, and I think it's important to understand the data as to what is the foundation really for what we are working with here. First of all, I know that many of you have probably seen this number before, or these numbers, but we lose 33% of our registered officials every season. That's the entire group. And of brand new officials, level ones, 50% of them do not return for their second season. And again, you've seen this in the mentor program presentations, and some of our early, but data has shown that if we can keep that official around through the first 2 seasons and get them to year 3, the retention rate climbs up to 90%, which is really where we want to be. So here's some startling numbers, and you know, as a result of those numbers, those retention rates, here's how it breaks down. Only 40% of our officials, okay, and in this year, because of the COVID, it's a little bit different, but 40% of our officials have 3 years of experience or more. Okay, if you take that out to 5 years, it goes down to 30% of our registered officials. And if you take that out to 10 or more years, it goes down to 17%. Paul, these numbers, I know that you've probably seen them before, but now that you see them again, how much of a concern is that such a low percentage of our officials have that necessary experience to be successful? We all say that in order to be a good official, you need that experience. And then how does that impact, you know, what you can do in your role as a state supervisor?
Yeah, so it's funny. I think it was at my very first USA Hockey regional camp, you know, where I heard the quote that good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, you guys have all heard the quote, you need 10,000 hours at something before becoming skilled at it. The hard part is a lot of this is just getting out there and doing it and really working the games. And I know we'll talk about assigning and everything else later, but that also comes from having officials in the right spots and the right games at the level that's appropriate for them and appropriate for the game. And I think that builds confidence. But you know, I look at these numbers and we've got 40% of our officials with 3 years experience. I mean, that's pretty low. Oh, hey CD, good to see you, sir. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think a lot of it, and we touched on it earlier, it comes down to the state supervisors really working with the local associations and also working with the programs to ensure that, again, these officials are walking into an environment where they feel comfortable working, they feel comfortable learning. There's a culture that my U10 kid who can't play at the same level as a midget or a junior player shouldn't expect the same level of officiating, because you're going to have folks who are learning on the job. And I think the data here just proves that, Matt. So the challenge, I think, and And clearly we've been having this discussion for years, is how do we find, that environment where we're able to cultivate, good, positive experiences. Because if people are having fun, if people are enjoying it, people are building those friendships and building that camaraderie that Thor and I talked about, they're going to come back. And if they're not having fun, they're not given the chance to either move up or progress in their careers. They start looking at it and say, why would I do this? So I think that's a challenge, especially at the amateur level. I don't want to get into the whole NHL hiring practice because that's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I think there's a lot of very, very great opportunities that USA Hockey provides and good opportunities that an amateur official can attain to. I mean, I never made it, 20 plus years in the NHL like Thor did, but I can tell you I had some amazing experiences thanks to USA Hockey and thanks to officiating.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I'm gonna share a little secret here. Thor and our little pre-session powwow, so to speak, when we reviewed these things, you seem to be pretty startled with these particular numbers. You have any thoughts that you want to share with the audience on this?
Yeah, I deal with a lot. I'm also on the discipline board. There's another gentleman and I that do all the discipline for North Dakota Amateur Hockey. So I see every aspect. I see from parents, I see from coaches, I deal with officials. This is very troubling for me is to see how percentages drop off so dramatically. I think of the skill set that you would need to officiate, say, the 14U tier 1 level, 16U tier 1, and to only have 70% of our officials that have 10 or more years experience is just startling. And I think as an officiating group, we have to do something to improve those numbers. I think part of it is a little more backing with our local officials. Again, we're in a small community. We don't have as many issues as I hear about in other places. Although this weekend I dealt with 4 different groups of parents that were abusive, didn't think that the officiating standard of the 14U B1 level was up to their standards. And the tough part is that for us to expect a level of perfection from any level of official, whether it's a 1-year, 2-year, 5-year, that's a tough standard to live up to. And I think that goes along with the mentoring part, where if those younger officials with less experience have someone to lean on after their game, someone they can text or call, and because we've all been through those games, nothing's perfect. We'd all like to be perfect, but that's really not attainable. And it just, when I saw these numbers, when we first got the spreadsheet, it's just startling that we only have 30% of our officials in the United States have 5 or more years experience. Because there's an awful lot of games that require experienced officials to take them on. And so I think as a group, and this means everybody, this isn't just the senior officials, this is us as a fraternity. Everybody has to do more to not only help the younger officials get involved and stay involved, but to help them progress so that these numbers go up. Because it's hard to believe that only 17% of our officials have 10 or more years.
Okay, thanks. And gonna just review some more data here, moving on. We did a survey back in 2004. And we sent out basically a questionnaire, an online questionnaire to roughly about 8,000 officials that were registered with us during the 2002-2003 season, but were not registered with us or did not come back that following season. And got a pretty decent response, 453 responses, and just wanted to share some of that data with you. I'm not convinced that the data is still 100% relevant, but it does actually match up pretty closely with kind of sort of the feedback we got from this group tonight in terms of identifying the main reasons as to why why officials leave. And one of the questions we asked is, were they ever mentored during their career? 85% of them back then there said no. I'd like to think that the number that has been mentored now, especially with the emphasis that we put on that, is a little bit higher. But this is something that we certainly need to continue to focus on. One of the last questions we asked is that if they would consider returning to officiating if things changed, if their circumstances changed. And 84% of them back there said yes, they would. And that's a key thing, or that's an important thing, because we asked them how they rated their overall experience with USA Hockey, and basically 79%, or 59 or 60% was either good or excellent, and another 20% felt pretty good about it. So it does give us hope that in some situations we might be able to get some people back and bring them back into officiating at some point. With that being said, we then also asked them, give us the single most reason, okay, as to why they left. Okay, so they were given a series of probably about 20 different areas, and they were asked to identify the single most important reason as to why they left. And just here's the numbers. Basically broken down by level 1, politics, local politics, assignments, opportunity was the highest percentage, followed by other commitments. It could be school, it could be job, it could be family, it could be health. And those two were significantly higher. And then we get down into the next two reasons, which were pretty close, which was the abuse and also the registrar and seminars, and basically the whole registration commitment part of it. We then also asked them, okay, to identify all the reasons. So we gave them that same list, and we asked them to identify all the reasons that contributed as to why they decided not to come back to officiating for that season. Okay. And once again, you can see it's still pretty much split with the politics, local politics, the assignments, and a lack of opportunity being the number one reason. Okay. And especially with the level 2, 3, and 4 officials, the other commitments and health was second still. And again, especially with the level 2, 3s, and 4s. And then we get into the abuse angle and the registration and those types of things. So interesting data from back then. Interestingly enough, our neighbors to the north, Hockey Canada, did a similar type of survey a few years later. I think it was around 2010, 2011, and their results pretty much mirrored ours. There wasn't that much of a change in terms of what they found out in their survey from what we found out. Now, 10 years later, 12 years later, with a culture change, obviously the pandemic this year plays a significant role and will probably play a significant role. So I'm not sure if we can duplicate it exactly like we did it a few years back, but the data is still relevant, and certainly the top 3 or 4 reasons still fit into why officials leave. So with that being said, I guess I'll bring it back to the Carney a little bit. What's been your experience? I mean, you've seen those survey results. What's your experience in terms of why the officials leave in your area in Georgia, or even some of the more experienced officials that you've worked with over the years? What's kind of sort of been your experience as to why they hang up the skates, and specifically, what can USA Hockey do to maybe change that atmosphere a little bit?
Yeah, so it's clearly a complex question. I don't have a simple answer for it, Matt, because if we had a simple answer to this complex question, we probably wouldn't even have the Zoomcast, right? I think a large part of it, we talked about opportunity, we talked about assigners, and the ability to get games. Because again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. If people are having fun, if they're, let's be honest, making money and enjoying what they're doing, then they're likely to stick around if they're having a good time. So, as we mentioned, it's very regional. I think the best setup, and I'm not sure if USA Hockey should mandate this or not, but I think it's a problem where your state supervisor is also your association president, is also your assigner. I think having one person at the helm of all those positions can make it tough. I think the more touch points we have with more volunteers, the better it is. There's a little bit more separation. There's less that, quote unquote, good old boys network. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is just making sure that the folks who are working games, as I said, are communicating. And I do think we need to put it kind of back on our officials and also communicate to our members and say, hey, listen, if you, it's almost like being your own, owner of your company. If you want to advocate for your company, you need to promote yourself and you need to let your assigner know, hey, listen, these are my goals. These are my aspirations. Let your state supervisor or whoever that individual might be, hey, this is what I want to do. These are my goals. How do I get there? And I can tell you that just how USA Hockey's set up, being, led by volunteers, is these people want you to succeed. These people want you to get games. And frankly, these people want you to be here for 3, 5, 10 plus, 28 years like myself. And the only way to do that is for you to advocate for yourself and for you to ask for games. And people are going to, help out the folks who really want to improve, really want to hone their craft and are hungry to get out there on the ice and do a good job. And unfortunately, sometimes, some officials think, well, if I just show up and go for a skate, and we've all been partnered with this official in our career, where they're not necessarily in it for the right reasons. And I think if we can get an increase of officials, Matt, that are there for the right reasons and are having a good time and are actively trying to make the game better and promote themselves, then I think we retain a lot more of these people. But again, I think that has to do with structure within the local associations and states, et cetera. And I think it has to do with the officials advocating on their own behalf.
Yeah, Thor, what's the experience in North Dakota in regards to, you've been relatively outspoken on the abuse issue. You've come to some of the USA Hockey meetings and stuff like that. You cited a situation where you had a couple of parents last weekend or whatever that behaved. What's that next step? How do we tackle the abuse issue further, and how do we ultimately hold those parents and coaches accountable?
So I have been very outspoken on this, and I might have to be more outspoken, I guess, in the future. So, and to answer Michael Bolton's question, I've been very proactive. I attend the North Dakota state meetings and I address the affiliate directors. I address the state officers and I tell them, if you do not deal with this abuse issue, at some point you're going to start canceling hockey games and it's going to snowball. And we, in North Dakota, we have in place a 3-game suspension for a parent that's removed. And I will say even more so, I've spoken a lot with our local affiliate here in Minot, and our program adds an additional 3 games to that suspension. So that parent knows when they sign their handbook for their child to play, if they get tossed from a game in Minot on the road, doesn't matter, that they're sitting for 6 games and not allowed to attend their child's game. It's been a very good deterrent on that side. Now, doesn't stop all of it. I dealt with a few this weekend. I traveled and watched a few different state tournaments on the east side of the state and had to deal with a few there. And what we do locally in North Dakota here is, and you need someone who's comfortable addressing the parent. And I, in a very calm manner, I just go over and say that your behavior is not acceptable. And if it continues, you'll be asked to leave. And I've been threatened. You name it. I've had everything thrown at me, and I just tell them, I'm not throwing you out of the building, but the police will. Like, North Dakota is a very protective state, and we just call the police and they come remove them from the building if necessary. It's a shame it has to come to that, but at some point, the line has to be drawn. And for us, we drew it a while back, and I'm not okay watching our officials. I got a young lady in this state who had a very promising career. And in one fell swoop in a peewee game, had a coach that just went way too far, and that young lady stopped officiating because of that. It was just way too far. So luckily we've talked to her, and she's coming back this fall, which is wonderful. But I think we have to, maybe we need something we need to do nationwide, is get to our state meetings and talk to them about, listen, this is where we're heading. And if we keep losing officials at the rate that we do, not only are you not going to have enough officials, but you're going to have very inexperienced officials doing games where it's just nothing but a recipe for failure. To stick one of these very inexperienced officials at 3 years into a game where, again, it's a lot to handle with an inexperienced official. And if we don't do something as a whole, as a fraternity, then it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, thanks, Thor. And I want to address a couple of questions here that are coming through the chat from a longtime supporter of ours, Harry Hotchkiss. And Harry, you're absolutely on the money as it relates to trying to develop a national level policy on some of these things. And I think the important thing to recognize is we are moving in that direction. We have a subcommittee that's been appointed that involves myself, our national referee in chief, Dave Labuda, section director, a couple representatives from the coaching area, the coaching section, and also from the adult and arena side of things. And we've been working on not only the updating of the zero tolerance policy, but working with our communications department in terms of some additional marketing and messaging that needs to go out and those types of things. But I think it's important to recognize in the zero tolerance policy, there's a couple things. We have a very specific procedure that's outlined as it relates to dealing with that spectator that has crossed the line and getting that spectator removed. But the other part of that zero tolerance policy and what we updated is the first step is we're encouraging every single local youth hockey association to designate a spectator, a monitor type thing and have them present for every game. And although we can't quite mandate that, the intention is to draw attention to the issue and then basically hold that youth hockey club a little bit more accountable down the road and working with our affiliates for the purpose of being able to get them on board, because they're the ones that are going to have the authority to mandate something like that. And to basically have every single game that's played have someone that's designated, whether they wear an orange vest is irrelevant, but someone that's designated as a monitor for the spectators, and they're the ones that are dealing with those issues. And then having that affiliate and or having that individual local youth hockey organization then hold those parents accountable, just as Thor kind of sort of indicated as it related to the 3-game suspension and stuff like that that Minot's implemented for parents to get removed from the game. Just kind of sort of filling up here the last slide or polishing off the last slide here. You've had the numbers in front of you. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but even if we can just improve our percentage rate or our retention rate on brand new officials from 50% to 65%, a 15% increase, in 3 years, we'll have 1,500 more officials that are part of our family. And basically a good chunk of those are going to be more experienced officials. And if we look at our overall retention rate, just a 5% increase going from 67% up to 72%. In 3 years will get us 2,400 new officials, or 2,400 officials added to our ranks and to our team. And that's not even necessarily any increase in growth that in new officials that we recruit. That's just simply doing a better job of retaining what we have out there. So those are pretty significant numbers, and those are kind of sort of the goals that we're shooting for, we're aiming for within the official section. So, want to get back to the panelists here real quick. Paul, I think my next question for you is, the local environment is something that's going to have a pretty significant impact in terms of the experience that official has. And let's face it, just like anything else, if the official is enjoying what they're doing because of that environment that's created for them, they're going to have more success. They're going to be more apt to stick with it. What's your relationship with the local hockey clubs, the youth hockey clubs, the adult leagues, and the affiliate in Georgia, and your overall relationship with the player side of things as the state supervisor, and whether you can share any ideas on how you can work with those entities to improve that environment?
Yeah, good question. So, Atlanta's a lot bigger than Minot is, but Minot's hockey community might be bigger than Atlanta's is, although we've got a pretty strong hockey community here just based on transplants. But I think a lot of it is knowing the hockey directors and getting with those hockey directors, as you mentioned, and getting buy-in from the affiliates as well on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so we basically tell our officials, if you have an issue with, a certain coach, let us know, and somebody will have a communication with that hockey director, because I can tell you that the hockey directors don't want their coaches acting in a certain way either. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is we actively, are trying to recruit those players that are just finishing up their careers in travel and maybe have a similar career path to what I had and want to stay involved in the game. And so it's a great way for, those local officials to stay involved, local players to stay involved in the game and move into officiating. And I think that's where we can get a lot of traction. I think, frankly, we talked about it on the offline session, Matt, but, you start getting 40, 50 years old, you've got kids, there's other stuff going on in life. I think if we can capture those late teens, early 20s officials and have them for 10, 15 years, I really think that's a great spot to build our base from and build that bench that you spoke of earlier. So the other thing I think is just getting the word out and, letting the local clubs know that, hey, we're going to have seminars at your rink on this day, and see if you can post signs inside the rink, whatever you can do from a marketing perspective, both digitally and also by throwing up advertisements within the rink. That's part of it as well. And then the last piece is, the hockey community is a small community. So if you can get folks to reach out, Thor mentioned that, Mike Schmidt got him started. It was the same thing with me. Gary Pedigo Sr., rest his soul, got me started with officiating because he asked me to come do it. And I said, you know what the heck, let's give it a try. So I think just asking the question and, letting those players and those clubs know that, hey, there's something you could do here and it could be a lot of fun. I think that builds our bench.
Yeah, thanks, Carney. And I guess my follow-up for you, Thor, is we've spent a lot of time emphasizing and talking about the mentor program. It's come up a couple of times tonight. We've dedicated 2 out of our first 37 Zoom casts to that particular issue. And one of the questions coming from the audience here is how do we get our senior officials to become mentors and work with our younger officials to bring them along and share that experience? And it's tough because we're asking more people to volunteer, but what's the magic trick to get them to be able to instill the same passion with some of them that we share with the people that are on this Zoomcast tonight?
That's a great topic. I think we lean back on that fraternity again, and so many of those senior officials, experienced officials, guys that are working Division I college hockey or even higher, working international stuff, they all had a mentor at some point. And I think one thing that we've been successful with is we don't necessarily do a very formal mentoring job here. something as simple as, Bob Smith goes out to the arena on a Saturday and watches this official over here for a period or two and just has a chat with him, and then steps over the other rink, and you can hit 5, 6, 7 officials in a couple hours, and just that little bit of backing that they get, that little bit of instruction, maybe make their life a little easier on the ice. That little bit goes a long way with inexperienced officials, because I think a lot of times they're on the ice wondering, am I doing this right? And the last thing we want to do, I work a lot with girls fast pitch, and I say we're either practicing doing it right or we're practicing doing it wrong. And the sooner we can get to these officials and help them correct, whether it's positioning or a skating lane or anything along those lines, formally or non-formally, whichever way we can get to them, that is huge, especially when you think about it's their first year of officiating, their second year. And again, we've done something. We're very aggressive in North Dakota. I have 4 wonderful regional supervisors that we go out and we recruit. We go to college practices. We go to high school practices. We work with our youth programs. They send out the emails for the seminars. That's who sends out our information. So we do get that information into the hockey players. And then the first thing I tell them at our seminars is play as long as you can. Okay. I don't want you to stop playing, but because once you're done, you're done. We all wish we could play forever. But wouldn't it be great that when you are done officiating, when you decide or you're done playing and you leave high school and you go off to college, what a great part-time job. I think it's wonderful. My son's just turned 20 years old, and that's his job in college. He refs a ton of hockey games, and regardless of where you go, you're always going to need those officials. And that's why I think it's so important for our senior officials. I'm not asking you to give up your whole weekend. Give up an hour, give up 2 hours, and be coordinated. Have someone that lines it up. So, maybe it's 2 guys a weekend that go out to the rink at different times and hit as many officials as you can, and give them that support system that they need. And again, let's try to get those numbers. That percentage has got to go up, because that's frightening to see for our future of this game.
Yeah, as a quick follow-up for either one of you, and this is real quick coming from the audience a little bit, is there any reason why we can't take that 17, 18, 19-year-old kid who has 3 or 4 years of experience and start instilling a little bit of that mentor attitude in him? So when he's working a peewee game with a younger official, that he's kind of sort of he or she is taking them under their wings as well. Is there any reason that we can't, pay it forward a little bit in terms of investing in that kid and giving them a little bit more responsibility as a 3rd or 4th year guy or gal, and asking them to also help out with the younger officials?
Absolutely. I can think of, we had an 18-year-old that worked a state tournament here this past weekend. Great young official, puts his time in and did a wonderful job. And for those 18, 19, 20-year-olds that have been doing this for a little while and had some success, what better example to go in and talk to a 12, 13, 14-year-old, whatever that younger age is, because, for them, they can see, holy buckets, I'm not far away from this guy. I could be there in a couple years, versus some old guy like me that they haven't, there's a YouTube video going about me from 30 years ago, but that's it. And so to have that younger generation be the mentors, I think that's a fantastic start.
Okay, great. And one more thing I just want to touch on this, the local clubs and stuff like that, and getting them involved. Someone raised the issue of having, whether it be a Saturday afternoon and the club schedules, 3 rec squirt games or some lower level squirt games, and bringing all the new officials into that site, and doing a little mentor shadow program where they switch every 20, 30 minutes or every period. So you're rotating a bunch of kids in, a bunch of new officials that getting some experience. That's absolutely acceptable within USA Hockey. And that's a great idea. And I know that there are some local associations that do that type of thing, but that again is the importance of working with that local youth hockey club in order to have them, work with you on the scheduling and to notify their coaches that, hey, this is going on. It's going on early in the season, and we're doing this now because it's going to benefit you, as a coach in your team in February when your teams are playing more competitive games. So
Yeah.
final question. Yep, go ahead.
Well, I was
Thor?
going to say, one thing that we've done and our local program has been wonderful is when we have a kid that's ready to go from half ice to full ice as an official, we put them out there, and we have an adult, a mentor out there in a tracksuit that skates up and down the ice with them for a couple periods and then backs off a little bit once they feel that young official's ready. Still on the ice with support if necessary. Now, that's just a way that we can support those young officials and let them get the experience of a full ice game. And it's not really one of our accepted systems in USA Hockey, but when we're out at the 10U level, it's great to get those new officials involved and have the support system behind them.
Okay, great. Final question, and this is kind of sort of for both of you, and looking for some feedback, but and based on your experience, over the years and the last few years, we've obviously made some significant changes to our registration requirements. We reduced the seminars, reduced the open book exam from 100 questions to 50. Back when you guys got started, it was 150 questions. We've done some things in terms of reducing the seminar and adding some modules. We've also had some things that have been mandated to USA Hockey that we really don't have any control over with Safe Sport and screening. That's just the way the world is nowadays. But with that being said, what are your guys' thoughts, and based on your experience, how do we balance the need to educate our officials and put them and give them the resources to be able to go out and be successful as an on-ice official, versus minimizing, the time commitment that they need to make just at the start of the season to be registered? I'd certainly be interested in your thoughts there.
Thor, you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Matt. Frankly, I don't think it's a terrible ask of what USA Hockey puts on the official in order to get credited and registered and get a patch and rule book and go work games. And frankly, some of it is just necessary knowledge and necessary to do. It's kind of like the Karate Kid. I mean, first you gotta learn how to paint the fence and wax the car before you're gonna start doing the swan kick. So you need to learn those basics, and a lot of it is in the seminars. And I do think it's been good. I do think the virtual seminars this year were great and give folks an option. And maybe USA Hockey continues to do some of those virtually and fit those into people's schedule. I thought that worked well given the pandemic. That may have been a positive that came out of it. But then the other thing, and you and I are both wearing the Advanced Officiating Symposium polos, is for those officials, once you're in a few years and you qualify for, level 3 or level 4, you can become tenured and you don't have to do the seminar. And there's some ways to go about that. So I think USA Hockey's done a good job, but I mean, the reality is, you mentioned the Safe Sport and the screening, and there's things that in 2021 just need to happen, and rules knowledge, if you're an official, needs to happen. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Okay, Thor?
So I appreciate the shot, Paul, that I don't have my Advanced Symposium shirt yet after 30 years, but I'll get there. I don't think it's too much of an ask. With my experience in youth sports, which is ongoing, the Safe Sport and the screening are very necessary items, unfortunately, in our game. And, one thing I see a lot of is basic mistakes by officials of stuff that they could learn by going on the modules, going on the ice at a seminar. So I think those things are very important. I think we've as a society, we want everything for free, and I don't want to put any work in. And you know what? If you want to go work a national championship, you want to work a state, you want to do whatever level, you're going to have to put the work in. And I'm looking at Dan's question here about climbing the ladder. They can climb the ladder as fast as they want, but it's going to be a lot of work for them. And that goes back to your rule knowledge, your expertise at your positioning, your experience. And so they're going to have to put the time in. And I personally don't think it's too much. I think USA Hockey has kind of backed up a little bit with what they require of the officials. I had no problem with it before. I understand that we want to get more officials involved, and I think it's just a little more of a commitment. We need your commitment to show that you're interested in doing this wonderful job that we do, whether it's at the grassroots level, moving on up to a national championship, or at the world championship level. There is a commitment that's required by the officials.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. I know that, look, this is a very passionate topic for many of us, and I know that we could probably spend the next 2 to 3 hours, and even more in some cases, talking about this particular issue, because it is very important to all of us. And but unfortunately, we are approaching the top of the order, or the top of the hour, so I'm going to do my obligatory sell, or I should say advertising that BJ makes me do every single time. But basically want to remind everyone of what the upcoming schedule is. Next Tuesday, the 23rd, BJ will have some very experienced minor pro officials out there talking about dealing with altercations. Scott comes back on the 30th, talking about officiating and hockey IQ. And the intelligence and understanding the game, and how that can help officials have success as well. And I'll be back on April 6th with a couple of our ADM regional managers talking about competitive contact and where that fits into the game, and what we're striving for there. Just a reminder to be sure to follow the USA Hockey Officiating Program on social media, Instagram, Twitter, with the various things. We have various things going out every day of the week through our social media channels that we'd love to have you take a look at. BJ will be sending out a follow-up survey at some point, and we certainly appreciate your feedback when you do receive that. So again, I want to thank everyone for participating tonight and being a part of our participants, and we very much appreciate your passion for this particular topic, and your continued commitment to the USA Hockey Officiating Program. Also want to thank Thor and Paul. I've been fortunate enough to be friends with them and colleagues for close to 30 years. And they're the type of people that make USA Hockey a little bit better every single day, whether they're working on the ice and representing our organization, or whether they're doing what they do now as volunteers. They're very much appreciated and an important part of what we do. With that, I'll give you guys a chance here to any final words of wisdom. Paul, anything you want to say to the audience?
No, in the spirit of retention of officials, I would just ask you guys, you guys know the folks that may not really be into it. And I would encourage you to say, hey, you're going to register next year, right? And looking forward to working together next year, that type of thing, because it's a lot more difficult to walk away if somebody's asking you to come back than it is if nobody's asking you, hey, come on out, we want you involved. And that may just be the difference. And then I know I'm preaching on a choir here based on the fact that you guys are attending, but anything you can do to help mentor and help give back, again, the power of volunteering and making USA Hockey and what it is today and owning it internally, I think is the key to our success. So have a great season. Appreciate you guys jumping on, and I'm accessible. I'm sure Thor is too, if you want to discuss anything offline.
Thor, any final words of wisdom, or what do you want to leave the audience with?
Kind of the same thing. The more of the officials, and even if you're not a really experienced official, but anytime you can help with a seminar, the more, the smaller groups that we have, the more information is retained by the newer officials. And then it's just another friendly face that they see at the rink when they're there. So I always equate everything to the hockey season. We had a preseason, we had a regular season, and we have a postseason, and now everybody go enjoy the off season.
Okay, thank you again, gentlemen, once again for your continued support. Thank you to the audience. Have a great rest of the evening. And most importantly, for those that are still skating, let's make sure we finish the season strong. And we look forward to having you involved next Tuesday. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Matt.